All right, good morning, everyone. Looks like we have folks still trickling in. I'm just going to wait about 10 seconds and get us started. Okay, I think we're going to continue to see that attendee count climb, but we have quite a bit to cover today. So I am going to go ahead and kick us off. So welcome to everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the kickoff session for the 12th Annual California Climate and Energy, or CEEC, Forum. My name is Julia Kim. I'm the Climate Change and Energy Program Director with the Local Government Commission. And for folks who may not be aware of LGC, we're hosting this forum. We're a California-based nonprofit working to build livable communities by organizing educational and networking opportunities like this forum, providing technical assistance, and partnering with local and regional champions dedicated to advancing local environmental, social, and economic priorities. So this forum is modeled after the annual CEEC forum that was hosted through the Statewide Energy Efficiency Collaborative, or CEEC. This was administered by the 4 investor-owned utilities. However, it did come to a close last year. We're grateful that 3C REN, Bay REN, and SoCal REN came together with the goal of preserving this forum, as well as the best practices coordinator position. And while we have a new look, our mission remains the same, helping California local jurisdictions save energy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and accelerate climate action. So I want to thank our REN partners for their leadership and commitment and sponsorship that enables this forum and our ongoing efforts to support California local governments. As noted, this year's forum is primarily sponsored by the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, and the Southern California Regional Energy Network. We'd also like to thank our additional sponsors, Terra Verde Energy, the Energy Coalition, and TRC companies for their generous support. You'll hear more from our gold level sponsors later on today, but if you haven't already, we encourage you to register for our sponsored events taking place during week 3 of this 3-week forum. We also want to thank our promotional partners who have helped to extend our reach, bringing new and diverse voices to the table, such critical roles. So thank you to all of our promotional partners. Also want to thank our Forum Advisory Committee for their guidance throughout the program development process. So from our REN partners, our forum sponsors, promotional partners, advisory committee members, it truly does take a village. And I'd be remiss if I didn't extend thanks to the team here at LGC, to Serena, Gabby, John, Kelsey, and Amber, who have been working tirelessly to organize this forum. So huge thanks to the LGC team as well. Last but not least, we also want to thank all of you for taking the time to join this kickoff plenary. This year's forum of this year's theme of transforming tomorrow together couldn't be more pertinent, and we look forward to engaging with you and learning alongside you over the next few weeks. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Alejandra Téllez, who is the program analyst for sustainability programs for the County of Ventura. Alejandra manages the local government partnership, Ventura County Regional Energy Alliance, which is the county's local energy efficiency clearinghouse office for training seminars, project identification, technical project support, and energy planning for municipal governments, schools, and community college districts, special districts, and small commercial businesses. Quite the role. Thanks, Alejandra, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the introduction and welcome everybody. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the RENs, and as you heard, there's 3 of us. So it's Bay REN, SoCal REN, and ourselves 3C REN, and why we decided to continue CEEC, why we felt it was important to continue what we've been experiencing for the last few years at the in-person forums and just sharing the best practices. As most of you hopefully know, regional energy networks are based because different and based in local governments, different from the other utility programs, because they're mostly administered by local governments. And we know the importance of local governments, and we've been benefiting from what CEEC has offered before. And when that opportunity came to the 3 of us, we felt it just made sense to continue the funding and continue offering what CEEC was giving us as local governments. As hopefully many of you remember, Bay REN and SoCal REN were the first 2 RENs that were approved back in 2012. So they're going nice and strong. It's going to be almost 10 years since they've been offering great programs to our local governments. It all started with LGSEC. If all of you are hopefully are members of LGSEC. They were the ones that started to kind of introduce this to the Public Utilities Commission and saying that maybe there was a different way to administer energy efficiency programs, and the local governments could play a bigger role into how all these programs were coming into our communities. As all of you know, local governments work together, and we offer a holistic approach to the different services that we have. As a local government, you get to work with other departments. You get to work with your general services department, with your planning departments, maybe even with your police or your sheriffs and your fire. So this helps us see a bigger picture and think beyond energy efficiency and be able to connect the dots. So we just felt as Rents, and when we saw that SEEK was at the risk of losing most of its funding, that we wanted to continue this and keep this going. So we felt that it was the best thing to do. And now as we're almost a year in kind of funding SIC and what's been offering, we're very excited to continue to do that. We're hoping that we're going to have an in-person forum, but excited to have this month-long forum and having the different topics. I was looking through the schedule last night, and it's just very diverse and tons of different information that we're all going to get to learn from. So thank you all of you for attending, and excited to continue to participate in SEEK, and excited to see what's coming in the future. And I want to now introduce our moderator, Angie Hacker. Angie Hacker is a perfect fit for a couple of reasons. She's currently our statewide best practices coordinator. We need to come up with a shorter title for her. But she has over 20 years of great experience working with the public, private, and nonprofit sector. So she has been the perfect fit to kind of get us all round up as a statewide and kind of share the best practices with us. I'm sure all of you see the weekly emails coming through. They're always full of great information. But she just always has innovative ideas and great resources to kind of share with all of us. And her 20 years plus experience speaks for it. So welcome, Angie.
Thank you, Alejandra, and thank you so much for your sponsorship and for all the RENs, and thank you for that background. It's very helpful, and I just want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Angie Hacker, really honored to serve as the SEEK Best Practices Coordinator and to help kick off this year's annual SEEK Forum with all of you from around the state. So we are in for an information and inspiration-packed 3 weeks where we are going to get to focus on how to better weave recovery, equity, public health into our local energy and climate work. So I've got my coffee. I hope you've got yours. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm actually going to be moderating 2 events today. Thank you so much for joining us for our first. This is the opening plenary. The goal of today is really to help us ground set in the unique circumstances we face as we try to continue to tackle our energy and climate goals in 2021. As you all know, 2021 has had some challenges. It's a year of elections that have an enormous consequence on energy and climate work. It's a year that's reminding us ever more loudly that global health crises like pandemics and climate change are more than worth avoiding. We get to witness our great golden leading state regularly outdo itself on aggressive goals, from carbon neutrality targets to clean transportation. And in 2021, we mourn and we grieve and we adapt and hobble along some of our under-resourced programs while trying to seek the silver lining of the opportunities that exist today as the pandemic accelerates changes in how we are using our buildings and vehicles and prompts major investments in a green recovery. So we can hardly keep up with all the groundbreaking policies and practices that are emerging from all levels of government, including folks like you on the line, doing the work, driving our energy and climate work to do more than it ever has before, more than just counting kilowatts and carbon, but to better account for how we affect people living in communities that we serve, especially those most marginalized and vulnerable. So it's truly a year for listening harder and in new ways to unheard voices as we transform tomorrow together. So that's our theme for this forum. And I just want to say that the SEEK team is always watching all of your best practices and all the work you're doing, and we see you moving the dial forward inch by inch, even in tough times, and moving us all forward. So thanks for being here. Thanks for all your work. And we appreciate that you're taking the time to advance the work even more alongside your peers at this year's virtual conference. So today's panel of state and local speakers and sponsors. And so our attendees, you actually get to participate too. You're going to help us highlight some clean energy and climate progress, challenges and opportunities from around the state as well. And that's what we're going to do together. That's what the discussion today is about. We're going to have, after we get through today's plenary, we have a half an hour, then we're going to dive deeper with an interactive discussion on state budget and policy updates that are relevant to all of you on the line doing local energy and climate work. We'll have the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and LGC's Policy Director. So that's over lunch. We hope you'll join us for that. So today we're hoping to get our bearings a bit amid a particularly challenging yet promising moment as we kick off this next 3 weeks. I do want to invite you to introduce yourself using Mural. So I'm going to just take a minute and share my screen and show you the Mural board. And I think folks are going to share also in the chat box a link. You can also use the one on the screen that was on the screen. So if you go over to Mural, if you've used it before, it's pretty straightforward. All we're really going to do here is on number 1, we're going to map our introductions. And this was just an attempt to see things happen across the state, meaning who are you and where are you located? So all you have to do here, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm actually typically located in the Santa Barbara area, but today I am in San Luis Obispo County, and I'm just going to put my name. You can actually zoom, you double click to put down a Post-it, and then you can just write your name. So here I am, and I'm just going to put Seek, Angie Hacker Seek. So just throw your Post-it down. So double click, put a Post-it, put your name and your organization on the map. And if you have trouble, you can scroll in and out using this this scroll right over here to zoom in and out on this bar. And later on, we're going to use this a bit. So I'm going to go into it a little bit more. There's some stuff over here on the left. Mainly, we want to introduce you to the icons. So later on, if you have something you agree with, you want to emphasize, you can use an icon to kind of drop it by somebody else's comment. So that is all I wanted to show you here on. And yes, you can increase it, you can decrease it as well. So go ahead, Serena, and pull back the screen if you would. Okay, great. Okay, so we also want to encourage folks to use the chat box to introduce yourself, share insights, talk to other participants. So while we're all finishing up on Mural, I want to start us off with a brief overview of the forum kicked off by this event. So we have 20 additional events being held through August 19th. Now, over the course of the next 3 weeks, between Tuesdays and Thursdays, the forum is hosting 2 plenaries, 10 webinars, 2 sponsor webinars, number 11 and 12, and 6 lunch events, which are meant to be interactive, along with 1 policymaker session that's specifically open to elected officials. So you might, if you aren't an elected official, you can always encourage them to attend. This year, webinars and lunch events will be part of one of 3 tracks. We have 3 tracks. One is holistic energy, climate and energy planning and readiness. Number 2 is equitable decarbonization strategies. And 3 is a just transition to clean energy. So we really appreciate all the folks that submitted proposals for all of these tracks. We have a lot of interesting sessions and topics, and they're going to cover a lot of different things that you all are working on the ground: building electrification, incorporating equity into programs, workforce development, funding, just to name a few. You can check out the full program and register for more of these sessions at eecoordinator.info/forum-program. Okay, so back to Mural. I'm not going to actually share it, but this is basically what the other exercise on Mural is. So you've already introduced yourself on the map. The second thing we want you to do is just through the course of the presentation, the rest of the session, we're asking you the same question we're asking our speakers, which is, for your jurisdiction, what do you see as the biggest progress, challenges, and opportunities in the next year? And so you can see on the screen, and if you go over to Mural again, you can just double click, again, throw a Post-it, put your comment down, areas that you see progress, challenges, and opportunities. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. So we really do hope that you have an opportunity to throw your comments down. If you have a thought now, if a thought comes up while somebody else is speaking, throw it down. Great. Okay, I am very pleased now to introduce our panel of speakers. They're each going to have 5 minutes to present some thoughts before we move into a Q&A discussion. And so first up, I am very pleased to introduce Commissioner Darcie Houck. She was appointed by the California Public Utilities Commission to the California Public Utilities Commission by Governor Gavin Newsom on February 9th, 2021. She formerly served as the Chief Counsel for the California Energy Commission since 2019. Commissioner Houck was an administrative law judge at the CPUC from 2016 to 2019, a partner at Fredericks, Peebles & Morgan from 2005 to 2016, and staff counsel and policy advisor for the California Energy Commission from 2000 to 2005. Commissioner Houck has expertise in matters concerning environmental quality, nuclear energy regulation, and safety policy, and she has an extensive background representing Native American tribes throughout the country on matters involving energy, natural resources, land claims, water rights, among other areas. So thank you so much, and I'm going to introduce the full panel now, and then I'll introduce each speaker. Next up is Deborah Gorman. As a middle child of a biracial military first-generation immigrant family, Deborah Gorman embraces the beauty and strength that lies in her great differentness. With an engineering degree and an MBA from Stanford, where she was the only African-American woman in a class of 300 graduate students, her work has spanned across the private, public, and political sectors in uplifting low opportunity communities with funding, team building, and financial and people resources. As Green Lining's president and CEO, Deborah serves as the unifying voice for our multifaceted policy work, bringing her unique intersectional perspectives to bear. We will also hear from Alana Matthews. She is an impact attorney and executive leader and equity champion. She is a former prosecutor and who transitioned from protecting victims and criminal justice to protecting vulnerable communities and environmental justice. She was appointed by Governor Jerry Brown as the public advisor for the California Energy Commission, where she developed the agency's Energy Equity Initiative, DEI programs, and coordinated a multi-agency disadvantaged communities advisory group. She later served as the chief consultant for the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change Policies, where she focused on environmental and climate equity. Ms. Matthews is currently the Director of Policy Resources and Training for the Prosecutors Alliance of California and adjunct professor at McGeorge School of Law. And finally, we will also get to hear from a local perspective on the Riverside City Council. Councilmember Fierro is focused on ensuring that the city of Riverside is doing all that is within its power to actively respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and to bring Riverside forward into a full recovery and eventual rebound from the traumatic effects of the pandemic. As the chair of the City Council's Economic Development Committee, City Council member Fierro has taken a leadership role in continuing business attraction and retention efforts amid the pandemic. So I think we have a really great panel, and we're going to first start off with 5 minutes from Commissioner Darcie Houck from the CPUC, who's going to talk about progress, challenges, and opportunities from her perspective across the state for local energy and climate action. I'll pass it to you, Commissioner Houck, and thank you for being here.
So thank you. I want to thank the California Climate Energy Collaborative for inviting me to today's event and for all of the local government representatives and others participating. I know 5 minutes isn't a long time to go through a lot. I do have some resources on the slides that I presented that have links to different workshops and proceedings that we have if you want more information about the events that or areas that I'm talking about. And so I first want to begin by framing our clean energy goals from the state perspective. Today, California's energy sector is in a pivotal, I cannot talk today, moment of transition as we strive to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with our climate goals and build a safer and more resilient grid, all while keeping our eyes on cost and maintaining affordability. SB 100 set bold climate goals for the state and establishes a target for renewable and zero carbon resources to supply 100% of California's retail sales by 2045. In order to reach the 2045 target to meet the state's economy-wide climate goals, California will need to roughly triple its current electricity grid capacity. The projected increase is driven both by the conversion to clean energy resources and growing electricity demand by electrifying other sectors such as transportation and buildings. In my comments today, I'm going to highlight a few key CPUC programs that further our SB 100 goals, as well as our resiliency goals, including proceedings addressing climate adaptation, microgrids, distributed energy resources, and affordability. I want to emphasize that SB 100 also needs to be implemented in ways that ensure low-income and disadvantaged communities are included, as well as rural and tribal communities, so that we're not leaving these communities behind. I believe that energy equity is a theme that you will hear throughout this forum. Equity is a key pillar of success to our energy policy. The PUC's work on affordability, social justice, and tribal issues are examples of how the PUC has incorporated equity principles into development of our energy policies. That said, we still have a long way to go, and we are continuing to find additional ways to incorporate these equity policies into our proceedings. So in furtherance of our SB 100 goals, the PUC ordered a landmark procurement decision this year. On June 24th, we ordered California load serving entities to procure at least 11,500 megawatts of net qualifying capacity in our integrated resource planning proceeding. This was under the leadership of assigned Commissioner Rechtschaffen. I want to note that community choice aggregators play a key role in advancing these procurement targets, and CCAs in conjunction with RENs are going to play a critical role in making sure that we have the right mix of efficiency, renewable procurement, or low or no carbon procurement to reach these SB 100 goals. CCAs serve roughly a third of the load in California and will remain key players as more community choice aggregators come into existence, particularly in the San Diego gas and electric service territory. We're seeing an increase. All California load serving entities procure resources needed for reliability and greenhouse gas emission reduction. I apologize. And they're also, the CCAs have increased in the number of programs that they're providing in conjunction with RENs that we just heard about earlier. And they're having to address a number of issues stemming from the pandemic, including increased customer arrearages, as well as reliability issues associated with climate change induced impacts and PSPS events that are caused by increased wildfires. While procuring new resources is a key part of reaching our 100% clean energy goals, we cannot simply build our way out of this problem. We must also reshape the customer demand to better track the generation profiles of renewable resources. Today, we're seeing a new wave of distributed energy resources capable of shifting load, electric vehicles, and behind the meter storage whose charging can be scheduled, building space and water heater systems that can be controlled remotely, and communications and power control systems to automate this activity so customers can spend as much or as little time as they want thinking about their energy use. These distributed energy resources will pose new challenges for distribution planning and demand management, but also new opportunities for making customer load more flexible, addressing the duck curve, increasing customer resiliency, and promoting equity. So given this shifting landscape, we have recently launched an effort to update our distributed energy action plan to ensure we have a cohesive vision and roadmap for leveraging this DER growth to achieve our clean energy goals. A draft of the plan was issued last month, and we're going to be holding a workshop on August 26th to seek stakeholder feedback. And there's links to more information on this in the slides. The Commission is also launching several new rulemakings this year under the umbrella of the DER action plan, including a proceeding focused on strategies to make customer demand more flexible and proceedings focused on distributed energy planning and grid modernization to accommodate high levels of DERs. And it's going to be important that we get input from local governments on distribution planning issues that we want to explore in that proceeding. So again, we're going to be seeking to increase local government input in utility distribution planning processes in order to better address local resiliency and clean energy needs. And a scoping workshop will be held this fall. I strongly encourage those interested in attending to participate in that proceeding. The PUC is also taking steps to remove barriers to commercialization of microgrids and recently approved $200 million to fund clean energy microgrids in vulnerable communities impacted by grid outages, as well as a $28 million program in PG&E's territory to provide technical support and cost offsets to vulnerable communities with resiliency needs. And more details about these programs can also be seen in the slides. Per our recent PUC order, the utilities are also required to hold regional meetings with local governments twice a year to share specific information meant to enhance coordinated resiliency planning and operations, including information about microgrid planning. And you can find more information about these meetings on the PUC's microgrid webpage. I just also want to mention that we have that we're looking at not only climate mitigation, but climate adaptation policies. And with our environment, we're also, as I mentioned earlier, incorporating equity issues, tribal consultation, and the provisions in our environmental and social justice action plan into our proceedings. And we need participation by your organizations and community groups to ensure we have an adequate record to make decisions and incorporate these issues. I know that my time is, I think, up at this point, so I just want to conclude by thanking you again for inviting me to join. I apologize for the quick presentation. There's a lot of information, and I encourage you to check out the resources presented in the slides, and will apologize that I will need to leave early before 11 o'clock this morning. And with that, we'll turn this back over to our moderator. So thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner Houck. We really appreciate your time being here today and for your leadership and work. Yes, we do have Commissioner Houck through 11, probably through the beginning of the Q&A. So thanks for that. Next up is Deborah Gorman. She is the president and CEO of Greenlighting Institute and is going to give us her take on progress, challenges, and opportunities in climate and energy action. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. So I too have a presentation, and I'll go very quickly. So I hope to download a bunch of information that will just sort of tease the conversation. Next slide. So Greenlighting, we've been around for since 1993, and we've been centered on racial and economic equity. And our, we're fiercely held to a vision where race is never a barrier to opportunity. I'm going to try to hit on the key progress, challenges, and opportunities, the pandemic. Where's our commitment, climate change, equity, and health. Next slide. So I'm going to try to do it in buckets of 3 stories here, talk to you about the past and how that's affected centering equity as a way forward, then where we are today and what we see for tomorrow at Greenlighting. Next slide. So the past, next slide. Let me just frame for you that redlining is the tradition and actually the systems, policies, and the economic foundation of segregating communities of color. So redlining was a way of separating those who are Black, Brown, Asian from white communities. And so in that intentional policy setting with the Federal Housing Agency, with the banks and the lending programs, was able to redline. These maps were literally created to redline the communities. And, oh, thank you. And so as you had seen over the last year during the pandemic and the racial awakening, the conversation about removing monuments, particularly in the South, that lifted up the Confederacy, there was an opinion piece in the Los Angeles Times that said, if you want to tear down monuments in Los Angeles of segregation and racism, you got to tear down the LA freeways. And I'll give you some context on that. Next, please. So this past history then brings us to today, where we still see this redlining happening. Next slide. So the redlining has also presented itself in the environmental impact, and environmental racism is nothing new, right? That race is the significant indicator of whether a person lives near contaminated water, air, soil, industry. So race, and so this redlining process of segregating has also carried into the environment, the way that we make our environmental decisions. Next slide. So now today, what we are looking at, and so I appreciate that Commissioner Houck went before, that we are looking at a utility debt crisis. And when I say utility debt, I am including water, electricity, gas, and broadband. And I appreciate this quote by the NRDC in both solar. Everyone should be able to wash their hands, keep the lights on, and stay in touch, right? Stay connected. But millions of families are at risk of losing access to essential utilities they can't afford. So the arrearages are real. The crisis we're in also are real. And so we are running and working on policy that deals with this utility debts and the shutoffs that are happening to communities of color and the low income community. Next slide. So if you were to take that red line that I showed you and layer the CalEnviro screen, which is, if you've not used it, a mapping device, a mapping platform that takes into 21 indicators that puts the spatial relationship and does the analysis of pollution burden, so that's exposures and environmental effects, with sensitive communities and socioeconomic factors, and you map that. And then if you take the COVID and you map that, they all layer on the same impact, so that you can see that the decisions and the policies that were established so long ago at Redline continues today, right? That you can no longer just say, redlining no longer exists, that in fact, the disinvestment, the allocation of resources, the policies, and the decision-making that's done has perpetuated a redlined ecosystem that we are now sort of integrated in. Next slide. So I love this quote by Audre Lorde, that there is no such thing as a single issue struggle. And I would argue, because we do not live single issued lives. And I would argue the green line, actually, the research shows us that those three maps that you saw, that they're all interlinked now. That if you are working on environmental issues, you are working on economic issues. And if you're working on economic issues, you are working on health issues. And that the idea that we would create a recovery out of this economic system that puts environmental issues on the back burner can no longer exist. In fact, that the environmental issues have been exposed as why the pandemic has been so devastating to communities and communities of color, and that there can be no recovery unless we center that population. Next slide. So what does tomorrow look like? Next slide. For us, we see the redlined economy as one where you have the input of power, racism, profit. The methods are extractive, segregation, hyper productivity, and we see moving. So these solutions and the progress we need to meet have to center racial equity, have to center communities who are most impacted in order for us to find our way collectively forward, and that the distribution of power needs to be shared, and that the communities are regenerative and cooperative, and then that will provide outputs of shared prosperity and resilient ecosystems. And last slide. So I would share then Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan's quote, that we have to do this in coalition, and that if you're in a coalition and you are comfortable, then you know it's not a broad enough coalition, that we need many voices at the table in order to find a way to progress through a recovery, solutions that are integrated, that centers those who've been most harmed and most impacted in order for the whole opportunity to rise. So thank you. I will pass it back to you. So I'm sorry, the reconstruction. So Green Line believes we are in a reconstruction period, that if there was a time of great reconstruction that was at the end of the 1850s, where the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, right, the ending of slavery, the right to citizenship and the right to vote was a Reconstruction period where there was prosperity for many. And we believe that we are in that a Reconstruction period that requires that we include all of those of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I appreciate your being here, and I'm so glad you're going to stick with us through the panel, the moderated panel Q&A. So thank you so much for getting through all of that so quickly. There's a lot there. Now I want to introduce Alana Matthews, and she's going to continue this conversation on progress, challenges, and opportunities from her perspective. So thank you so much for being here, Alana.
Thank you for having me. So I'm very excited to be here and also to be a part of the next interactive part of this opening plenary session. So we are kicking this off, what we called ground setting in our new normal. So if you'll just indulge me, because I like to think outside of the box, I want to take everybody through an exercise that I used to do as a prosecutor as I did ground setting for my juries at the close of my trial before they went into deliberations for a verdict. So this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it in 5 minutes. I'm going to ask everyone to close your eyes. I'll say a word or a phrase. You think of what comes to mind, and I want you to hold that image. Now, I will say one other thing. I hope everyone is prepared to take notes. So if you don't have a paper, run up and go get one really quick. And since I'm the only one spotlighted, it doesn't matter if you're wearing your pajamas or what's going on in the bottom. Just go get something to write with, because that's going to be important too. But I'm going to tell you a phrase, and I want you to think of an image. And then I want you to hold that image while I repeat the phrase. And then I'll give you a few prompts so that you can focus and start noticing the details about that phrase. Okay, hope everybody got some paper. You're ready to write it down. Let's go. So close your eyes. Here we go. Clean, healthy, thriving communities. Clean, healthy, thriving communities. That's the phrase. And I hope you have that image in your head. An image of a clean, healthy, thriving community. Now hold it. And I want you to see, why is it clean? Keep holding the image. How is it healthy? What makes it thrive? Okay, open your eyes. Do you remember the image that you saw? Great. I want you to write it down. Now, when I closed my eyes, I saw a clean, healthy, thriving community. It was a neighborhood, and there was a park, and I saw kids riding their bikes. I saw other people walking around. They were smiling, they were laughing, they were engaged. Now, I want you don't have to close your eyes, but I want you to think of another image, and that is the image of the most vulnerable communities where you live, or the most vulnerable community of your constituents, or the most vulnerable community of your customers. And you should have those two images side by side. And that's the framework for this conference. That's the ground setting. So when you think about engaging about clean energy solutions, progress, challenges, opportunities, don't think of that as a noun. You're going to have all the links of all the different programs and plans, and this is not nouns. It's a verb to take you from that first image that you saw to the second image, and make sure that first image transfers. Clean energy solutions, progress, challenges, opportunities. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It's not a thing, it's a process. It's not a destination, it's a journey. A journey to clean, healthy communities. So as we delve deeper into all the information for the conference, this is the framework for the information you receive. Hopefully it will lead you, it will guide you, it will inspire you to realize that image for all of the community members, all of the constituents, all of the customers that you serve, so that we get clean, healthy, thriving communities for everyone. And I'm so happy of what, a lot of what we just heard. We have to bring many voices to the table to make sure we do that. We overlay the map so we know what the past and what the present and even the COVID map. This is the framework to create a new map that doesn't have disparities, but maps that have resources, that have investments, that have policies and co-governing decision-making. Thank you. Keep that image in mind. And during this conference, let's move closer to clean, healthy, and thriving.
Thank you, Alana, for taking us through that process. I really appreciate it. We'll hear more from you during the panel as well. And a quick plug before we move to our next speaker, to make sure that as you're getting inspired by these speakers, that you're putting some thoughts in our mural board on progress, challenges, and opportunities, please. All right, last but not least, we have from the City of Riverside, City Council Member Ronaldo Fiaro. He's going to give us a local perspective on the latest progress, challenges, and opportunities from his perspective. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. And I'm not sure how well I can follow up Alana. I have no fun exercises to have people closing their eyes, so bear with me. But no. I want to thank you guys for having me here. One of my absolute favorite topics to talk about. And I'm here as an elected official, not as an energy or a climate expert. And I certainly can't tout the same breadth of experience and industry knowledge that some of my fellow panelists have. But as an elected official, I do bring a somewhat different perspective, and I hope to elaborate on that a little. So I was elected to local office 3 months before COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. COVID-19 showed us and the public that local governments have the ability to lead in times of crisis. It wasn't the federal government or the state that enacted the first eviction moratoriums when millions of renters were facing immediate eviction. It wasn't the federal government or the state that first realized the need to enact stay-at-home orders to save lives. It was local leaders that took the initiative that in turn affected state and federal policy. This same bottom-up leadership approach can and should be used to address another invisible enemy that had proven itself far more dangerous and urgent, and that's climate change. The climate crisis constitutes a clear and present danger to the health and to the well-being of our planet and to the future of our children and our children's children. We all recognize it here in this room and have witnessed its effects here in California. Over 52,000 wildfires blazed through the state of California in 2020, decimating entire communities, coupled with the reality that the nation's worst air quality exists here in inland Southern California. Yet one of the largest barriers to climate action has historically been, and continues to be, a lack of true political will. While a recent PPIC poll that came out the other day showed that 2 out of every 3 Californians believe that the effects of climate change have already begun, when also asked about the most important issues facing the people of California, climate change didn't even come up. The general public and elected officials can say with confidence that climate change is real and that it is affecting our communities. Yet there seems to be little immediate urgency or real personal ownership of this critical issue. To begin to achieve this, I believe that we, as clean energy advocates and government leaders, need to better communicate the intersectionality of climate change. We can do this by bridging the climate change fight with a fight for economic prosperity and job growth, by bridging the climate change fight with the fight for equity, for quality of life, and for better public health outcomes, and by bridging the fight for climate change with the fight for affordable and quality housing. While California is the 5th largest economy in the world, our level of income inequality is higher than that of all but 5 states in this country. Families that are at the top of the income distribution have 12.3 times the income of families at the bottom. So when we begin to talk about clean energy solutions as a remedy to economic issues and as a remedy to health disparities, we can build more consensus and public buy-in, which in turn translates into political will by elected officials to champion issues that their communities already admit to caring about, even when they're disruptive. A good example of this is the current effort that we are currently undertaking here in the city of Riverside to craft the Building Decarbonization Reach Code Ordinance. We would be one of the first cities in Southern California and in SoCal gas territory to make such a move, which naturally means that many eyes are peeled on what we're going to do next. Instead of following the normal policy process of crafting an ordinance in a council meeting, holding a couple of public hearings, and sending the REACH code on its way to the California Energy Commission, we are starting by bringing those that may oppose the ordinance, including the gas company, into a room with builders, organized labor, community leaders, climate advocates, and affordable housing developers to discuss how we can create holistic policy that can truly decarbonize our built infrastructure while also creating clean jobs in our community, addressing public health concerns, and ensuring quality affordable housing isn't affected by this REACH code ordinance. This will not be an easy task, but it is a necessary one. The 47 cities behind us that have adopted building electrification REACH codes, along with hopefully ours, will be what ends up shaping state policy. COVID-19 showed us without a doubt the ability for local governments to break down traditional bureaucratic barriers, cut through red tape, and provide bottom-up solutions to the greatest challenges of our day, but only when the political will exists. This means that it's more important than ever, not just for local governments to sit up to the challenge, but for state agencies, federal agencies, and advocacy groups to coordinate and support local efforts so they have the best chance of success. All the while remembering that clean energy solutions go hand in hand with economic prosperity, and that together they can be an engine for economic and societal growth for decades to come. Local government will continue to be at the front lines, creating and building that engine. This is the task before us, and I'm more confident than ever that we can achieve this goal, if only we can find the fortitude and the political will to do so. That's all I have. I'll send it back to the moderator, but I'll be able to stick around for the entire Q&A. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Council Member, and thank you to our entire panel for ground setting us in that way and your thoughtful comments that really have helped us begin to do this process of weaving the conversation of local energy work alongside equity, health, and recovery. So very thoughtful, and I really appreciate the conversation around how this is affecting our frontline communities. And so right now, our attendees, I'm going to ask a few questions sort of on behalf of the attendees, and they're primarily folks working in local government, having had maybe a particularly challenging year, serving communities that maybe have had a particularly challenging century. And their job is to steward these communities through crisis. And we actually just published a document on transitioning to tomorrow's buildings, where we're trying to look at where the cracks of the crisis have allowed for some opportunity. And I want to pose the first question to you, Commissioner Houck, while we have you here. What opportunities should local governments take advantage of as we recover from crises or as we continue to work through these crises?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think there's a lot of opportunities right now, especially in looking at how we're revisioning our energy grid, local government planning processes, and incorporating local needs through CCAs and RENs. I think the REN programs are expanding, and looking at opportunities for how local governments that are closer to their customer base can provide some of the resources that we've traditionally seen from the investor-owned utilities. And I think we've seen some examples of partnerships between some of the IOUs, particularly PG&E, and some of the community choice aggregates in their service territory, and how they can best utilize that connection to their local constituents. I know that the PUC is looking at a lot of work on affordability, and we've required the investor-owned utilities to put together plans and looking at how we're coming out of the pandemic, what sorts of resources and support we're going to need. We've got a proceeding on the arrearages and disconnections, so we're looking at affordability issues. Our affordability proceeding is looking at not just California as a whole, but we're recognizing that there's regional differences, both in the context of income and weather impacts, as far as how often people need to be running their air conditioning in different climate zones. And I think looking at that in the context of maybe re-envisioning how we do rate design, and again, how we set up programs, is going to be really important to get local input and how we're moving forward. And I think right now is there's tremendous opportunity for local governments to participate in those processes and help us look at how we are going to re-envision what we're doing with energy in just so many different sectors right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Houck. And I think for this first question, we'll just go down the line in the order that we presented it. So Deborah, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I would. We work very closely with the CPUC, so it's wonderful to be on the panel with Commissioner Houck. And I think the awakening, the racial awakening that the country has experienced has created tremendous opportunity to do things differently and to be in conversations. There are conversations that are being had that were either sort of back channeled or not as serious, that are now front and center. That those who are impacted most and the hardest are being considered first. I think that's a tremendous opportunity to get it right.
Thank you so much. Alana?
Yeah, I'm just going to amplify that message. I was going to say the exact same thing, is that this is an opportunity to prioritize vulnerable communities. We've consistently seen that they are the last communities, or ignored communities, neglected communities, and we talk about equity. This is how we do equity. Again, it's not a noun, it's a verb, and we have to prioritize. But I'd say another opportunity is to break down silos. Because as Deborah said, when you're working on environmental issues, you're also working on economic issues and health issues. Well, you know what? You're working on public safety issues. Because if the grid goes down, well, your alarm is not working, your Ring doorbell isn't working. So we have to be able to see that. And we're also going to see benefits in education opportunities. So we need to break down those silos and not only build relationships and collaborate with the community or industry. We need to start reaching out to our local public safety officials, our district attorneys' offices. We need to have teachers involved in schools and educational institutions. So we definitely want to prioritize the most vulnerable communities, and we also want to take the opportunity to break down silos.
Councilmember Fierro, would you like to respond as well?
Yeah, can you repeat the question? I think I know what it is. I just want to make sure.
In short, what unique opportunities should local governments take advantage of as they work through the crises of 2021? So this unique moment in history, what opportunities are there?
Certainly. Well, from the local government side, I mean, there's once in a lifetime government funding coming down from the state and from the federal government. So that's been a huge opportunity for us to leverage, tens of millions of dollars to accomplishing our goals, our goals of reaching affordable housing, of tackling climate change, and frankly of economic growth, economic mobility. How do we, we know that when you're poor, you're more greatly affected by all these negative things we talk about: climate change, income disparity, health outcomes. The way we can actually deal with all these issues is through economic mobility and by making sure that we are creating good and quality job growth. So I've always felt that those issues, they strongly correlated. And I believe that government funding and, like I said, this once in a lifetime opportunity, as a result of a global pandemic, we have an ability to rebound out of this a lot better and not to steal from our current the current occupant of the White House, but we can build back better. We really can. And I know that America wants this. And I know that my community wants this. So I would say that's probably our greatest opportunity to rebound out of the pandemic and to do what we knew needed to be done a long time ago.
Thank you all. We're going to have a lot more sessions where we get to dive into these things in more detail. So this has been a great teaser, and we're sort of welcoming you to join these conversations more deeply as the conference goes on. I certainly have talked to a lot of you, and I know that you guys are trying to figure out how to do this work on the ground. And there's a lot of people that are groundbreaking that we want to showcase, and we will do that during that conference. But let's continue along with the pandemic. And just my second question, and it doesn't have to go in any particular order, so if you feel ready, go ahead and respond. In what ways can the sort of new global focus on health help us gain greater urgency on energy and climate action? I'll invite anybody to chime in.
No, I'll jump in. So I think focusing our attention on public health is how we can ground the issues we're talking about to the average person, right? The average person is mostly concerned about how things affect them, the health of their family, the income of their family, what kind of housing their family has, what kind of community their family lives in. So public health is at the heart of what's most important to most families, right? They want themselves to be healthy, they want their kids to be healthy, and they want their kids to live in, to be able to have it, to inhabit a world that has clean air and clean water, and that they can also thrive and be healthy. And so I think it's incredibly important that we talk about how climate change and how climate issues affect public health. And I think that's going to be a winning argument along with the economic potential of new green industries. So I think it's a great way to tackle this, because we have to make the average person care about these issues. And sometimes they're too high level for a person who's struggling to make rent, who's struggling to get their kid into a good school. They just don't have time to care about those issues. So by relating it to things that affect their day-to-day life, I think is the best opportunity to get the average person, especially in this country, to care about these critical issues that are going to affect these things long-term.
And I would just add in that I think the focus now, it gives us an opportunity to show our interconnectedness, because certainly in this pandemic, we have seen how our individual choices can really have an impact on people all around us with just minimal contact. And so a lot of times these discussions are sort of held in the government world or among the policy wonks or the local government leaders. And we're not really engaged based on our interconnectedness to each other. And it's an opportunity of this urgency to bring everybody into the conversation and figure out how everybody can take ownership and be a part of this. So certainly it's a priority because it's going to affect your life, but it also is a sense of urgency because of how we are interconnected and how we can impact each other's well-being. So it's no longer this other or us and them, or you over there and I'm over here, or this is what has happened. It's sort of like a we.
I'm gonna leave it open in case anybody else wants to respond on this topic.
I'd like to just make a comment. It overlaps with the prior question as well. And I know I've only got one more minute to go, but I think with the pandemic, we saw how critical having access to broadband is for all communities, whether it's telemedicine or education or work, which all contribute. Having access to those things is becoming a necessity, not just something that's optional. And we've recently got, both from the federal and state government, a $6 billion investment in expanding broadband, which is also going to be looking at open access middle mile. And the PUC is going to be opening up a program to provide technical assistance for local governments that want to put together their own resources for providing broadband access. And I think that is going to play a role as we move forward with the uncertainty regarding whether we are or are not coming out of the pandemic, and making sure people have access to those resources, including, again, telehealth, education, and staying connected. Like Elena said, that, being able to be connected and have those dialogues. If it's through a virtual environment, we're going to need to have that interconnection. So I wanted to put that out there and make sure that we know that local governments are going to be having an increasing and critical role in seeing those connections.
Okay, thank you so much. I certainly know in my work, it's emphasizing the run loose health issue has certainly emphasized the need to tackle climate change in big ways. Avoidance pays off enormous dividends. And I hope that folks around the country here are keeping that in mind. I know the folks on the line certainly are. Let's move on to our third question, and this will be our final question. From a certain point of view, it could look like the country has moved from a certain proportion of people continuing to deny climate change to here we are in 2021, and a humongous focus is now on adaptation and resilience. And the question is, have we skipped an important phase here where maybe the least palatable but most critical solution, mitigation, have we lost sight of it? Is it a priority enough right now? Meaning, a way to avoid the climate catastrophe, or at least maybe the worst impacts of it. And then what will it take to get it done in time to protect the most vulnerable? And I'll leave it up to anybody who's ready to
I'll jump in. So when you talk about mitigate, you're talking about are we missing a critical step in mitigating the effects of climate change rather than adapting to energy changes that we knew need to happen a long time ago?
Yeah, mitigating meaning reductions in emissions.
Okay, yes. So this is why I was excited to speak and why most of my discussion was about the political will, because we've known for quite some time that decarbonization was the most critical element of this situation. But instead, and I'm sure the panelists, everyone listening know that even California state has focused on energy efficiency for so long, even though as early as 10 years ago, we knew that wasn't where we needed to be. The appliances and energy efficiency was where it needed to be. What we needed to start talking about was decarbonization. So decarbonization has a more tangible effect on industry, on business. And I think everyone just wanted to avoid it. They wanted to avoid the argument. They wanted to look like they were addressing climate change and climate issues and clean air issues without actually, dare I say, pissing anybody off. That was always their goal, right? And we no longer have that luxury. We don't have the luxury of keeping everybody happy while we make these critical decisions. What we can do is bring everyone around the table and try to mitigate and address any concerns about what our actions are going to do, which is what we're trying to do with building decarbonization. But we no longer have the luxury of making everybody happy. Natural gas companies are not going to be happy with the decisions we make, and that's just the way it's going to be. They're a private industry. They need to adapt, and if they want to be relevant in the 21st century, they're going to have to make the changes that we know need to be made. So I think that the time for being nice is over. We wasted that time, and now it's about going as quickly as we can towards the policy changes we know will actually have a tangible effect. I'm over the feel-good measures. It's time to start doing stuff that will actually decarbonize our planet and our communities so that we can begin to address climate change. 20 years too late, in my opinion, but where we have the ability to do everything we can at this point moving forward to try to avoid catastrophe in the near future. So
one of the reasons why I did the exercise that I did is because I wanted to create an image. And sometimes we get so bogged down in statistics and data and programs that we forget why we're doing what we're doing. And I think having that image of a clean, healthy, thriving community, that's what needs to be at the forefront. And when we're able to do that, guess what? Ronaldo, it's easier to make those decisions because it puts in the forefront, this is what we're striving for, this is what we need to do. And it really puts in perspective what the other interests are. And there are some difficult choices. Sometimes they're expensive choices to decarbonize and focus on where our emissions are coming from. Like, it's great in the electricity sector, we reached, our climate goals years ahead of schedule. But what's really creating that picture? What's helping us to achieve a clean, healthy, thriving community for everybody? And when we're led, not by issue, not by program, but by the value, by the image of that, that's what we stay focused on. And it's easier to move in that direction.
And I would add the denial part, the fact that the adaptation and sort of a bit more accepting of climate change, but the denial part is the segregation and the racialized solutions. Like there is still denial, right? That there is opportunity for everybody, that we are colorblind. In fact, the policies and the solutions, if we don't understand that history of how we got there, we're going to do it again and again and again. And we're going to continue to separate our communities and not have something that works for all of us. And so there continues to be this very rigid denial that, some of us have privilege and some don't, and that we can create, we can do a cap and trade and we can do the solutions that have landed us where we are now. And so I think the denial part of we can create policies that don't do what we did in the past is the part that we're still sort of stuck in. And I definitely see the opportunity to even be in conversation with each other. And what does that mean for your community if I do, you know, sort of put solar, because what's going to happen, right? If you can move to solar and you can like redesign the grid, those with the resources will move, and then the waste of that will move onto the grid to a solar grid, and the waste will go to those who are most vulnerable. So there's still a denial, but it's happening in segregating us and separating us. And so I'm hopeful that we're like, okay, look, we got the blinders off. Can we do something that's more regenerative and more democratic, as opposed to sort of this narrowing of the issues and repeating the poor policies and the bad resource allocations that we did in the past.
We have a couple more minutes, and I want to encourage anybody to sort of riff off of that, respond to that, or even provide any specific examples of something you see that is a glimmer of hope of things that are being done around the state that are being done right.
Well, I have seen, I'm in Sacramento, and we have a utility that has taken the initiative to create a mapping tool that really overlays a lot of what Deborah has talked about, so that we're looking at public safety, economic opportunity, as well as clean energy issues of how we can have investments. And so we have a lot of different maps and tools, but they're still, you know, not together. And so there is, you know, a building collaborative that SMUD is doing, where they're bringing different stakeholders together and really able to tackle a lot of different issues and resources, but then leverage them at the same time. So I think that that's a good model, and it's now bringing into the conversation, you know, members of those vulnerable communities who, you know, Ronaldo said, you know, they're just dealing with so many different crises. How are they looking at that? But we're able to engage in a long-term approach, I feel, that is actually meeting the immediate needs. So there's obviously transportation issues, but now we're bringing in clean transportation. So that's not only cleaning the air that they're breathing, but it's also providing mobility where there has been a lack of access. So I think using those resources and leveraging them, and I will put the tool in the chat. I got to look it up. But I think that's a good example of how we can break down those silos and start really focusing and prioritizing vulnerable communities.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful too. I in terms of, if you ask the most vulnerable communities to prioritize, they will put climate change, because they are the ones that have the bad water, the bad air. You know, they're the communities closest to it, so they actually rank climate change and adaptation is something that they would like to move to. So I think talking to those communities is very hopeful. And then from just an economic perspective, I mean, when you have the Federal Reserve right now talking about assessing environmental risk as an economic impact, like, you've moved the dial, right? When you actually have, like, we're going to rate your stock, your bonds, we're going to do debt based on the negative environmental impacts that you have. That's a significant change. And when you have, you know, when you have this huge, you know, capitalist economic engine actually nodding towards, we need to use this as a literal credit risk, like, good sign, really good sign. And then you have the most vulnerable saying, look, we really get it because we need to heal from it. Really, those convergences. And then you have the, you know, the philanthropic community saying, look, we need to get with this mutual aid and help communities like pull through this. Like, those are some really good, you know, signposts, guideposts of like how we can really get there. So I hope you can tell I'm kind of enthusiastic about where we can go, and that if we can roll up our sleeves and everybody sort of say, yeah, you know, from my perspective, here's where I think we could create pathways. I think we really have an opening that this generation during this time that we say, yeah, we got it, we did something.
Oh, and I'll jump in and just say that I think that anyone who's had a chance to dive into the infrastructure bill that just went to the Senate, it's clear the transition we're making in terms of, to Alana's point about mobility and how we move people around. An infrastructure bill that would have been 100% roads and bridges, we saw a large chunk of money, I think something in the neighborhood of $30 billion towards public clean transportation, right? Light rail, high-speed rail, different ways to move people around in a clean way to get people out of their cars. Now, that type of mentality is a big shift because the average American wants their road repaired, right? That is a winning argument to say, I'm going to take a large chunk of that money and spend it on new types of transportation that Americans aren't certain that they want to utilize yet, really shows the fact that the federal government in a top-down way cares about climate change, because mobility, affordable housing, energy issues, they all correlate, like I said. So I think I'm highly confident that mentality is starting to shift towards creating the infrastructure we need to have a decarbonized world. Because without the infrastructure, we're putting band-aids on gunshot wounds, because people are still going to get in the car and they're going to utilize the transportation they know of until we make a strong investment in new technology. And this bill that hopefully is going to the president's desk soon, I think is a perfect example of how that mentality is finally starting to shift.
Thank you all so much. That wraps up perfectly our panel discussion. And I really want to thank our amazing panel. I truly enjoyed even just listening to that. And I appreciate especially how we got to some optimism at the end, some excitement about what's to come, some structural changes that are very tangible, providing some glimmers of hope. And I want to invite folks that are listening in to share some appreciation for our panelists in the chat and continue to have discussion in the chat. And don't forget about Mural. You can also share your any new thoughts on progress, challenges, and opportunities. And just to sort of close this part of this by saying, back to the folks listening in, the local climate and energy practitioners, you guys are in my mind, you're the future makers. You're working on the ground. You're the ones with the opportunity to change how we do all of this. A lot of responsibility in your hands, and I couldn't think of a better group of people to do it. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists. We're going to move into our next segment. You're welcome to join us. Okay, so let me go ahead and move us along. And we're back to giving another set of thank yous to our sponsors. And what we're going to actually do here is turn it over to two of our sponsors, and they're going to share similarly some reflections on this topic, their own take on where the progress, opportunities, and challenges are. And so first up, I'm going to welcome David Burdick, Executive Vice President for Terra Verde Energy. So thank you, David, for your sponsorship and for being with us today.
Absolutely, Angie. Thanks so much. And good morning to everybody. Terra Verde Energy has been a longtime proud supporter of the SEEK Forum, and really thrilled to be joining this conversation again about the importance of focusing on climate and energy initiatives. At Terra Verde Energy, we're really focused on the important part that distributed energy resource technologies like solar and battery energy storage systems play in the kind of portfolio of programs needed to move the needle on getting our communities towards cheaper, cleaner, more reliable electricity. If you'll advance to the next slide, just a quick little blurb about us. We're a small team of consultants that work with local governments, with CCAs, with schools and water agencies on how to capitalize on the technologies, the business models, the funding sources, and the programs that are available right now to advance these kinds of initiatives. Over the past 12 years, we're proud to have delivered $50 million in real savings to our clients. And we're right now focused heavily on capitalizing on current programs and incentives available for increasing climate resilience through deploying solar plus battery, backup power enabled cost savings projects. These technologies, when deployed properly, can both reduce costs and also increase resiliency by providing backup power to critical facilities throughout communities. CCAs, as some of our partners throughout the state, have been really leading the charge in figuring out ways to bring together stakeholder groups to take advantage of the funding and the programs that are available to deploy these technologies in a meaningful kind of programmatic way. And coming up later in this series, we want to invite you to our hosted webinar. If you'll flip to the next screen, coming up on August the 19th, we're going to be doing a deep dive into how local governments and how practitioners like you can take advantage of the current incentives and the funding programs that are available right now to deploy solar and battery resources. So we'll be talking about, for example, where funding currently stands within the self-generation incentive program. As we speak today, there are now $63 million available in the state of California and various regions for the base level incentives for these kinds of projects. And that's down by nearly $30 million over just the past 6 months. So this funding's moving extremely quickly. We're going to dive into the details in terms of how do programs like this work and how can your teams take advantage of that. We're also going to be diving into how teams can think about the actual financial value of having energy resilience, because that's an important part of putting the puzzle together in terms of how to justify the cost effectiveness, in terms of prioritizing capital investment or qualifying for programs for these projects. So we'll be diving into that, as well as introducing a new market lever that's being pulled on by several of our clients, and namely optimizing the value of their existing solar investments through refinancing or buying out their existing solar agreements with third-party owners. So if that's a conversation you'd like to have, we would love to have you join us. You can register for this part of the program at the link below. You can also feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on this next slide, and I would be happy to continue this conversation both at that event, or if you have specific questions or things that your team is thinking about, would love to take the conversation offline and have a chat. But again, Terra Verde Energy, so thrilled and pleased to be sponsoring this year's event.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it. Next up, I'd like to introduce Laurel Rothschild from the Energy Coalition to provide her sponsor remarks. Thanks, Laurel.
Wonderful. And good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Laurel Rothschild. I'm the Vice President of Energy Programs at an organization called the Energy Coalition, which, as you can see, is incredibly proud to sponsor this year's SEEK Forum. I just want to share that on a personal note, I've participated in all 12 forums, and I've really always valued this what I find to be a really unique opportunity to connect and learn from others across the state about what this is, just an evolving world of not only energy efficiency, but many other related topics that are important to all of us that are really focused on developing local programs and practices that really drive positive change and action locally. So if you jump to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about tech. I'm hoping many of you have heard of us. We are a California-based nonprofit. Our mission as a nonprofit is really to empower communities to leap into the clean energy future. And we do this by providing communities with the necessary tools and resources. We bring ideas, technologies, and infrastructure to communities, public agencies, businesses, educators, policymakers, and many more. We see ourselves as just really creating the building blocks for how the new energy economy in which these communities can really become energy producing networks, and clean energy becomes affordable and accessible for everyone. We have several service areas, which you can see here. And I just want to comment that to tie into this forum theme, we really recognize the importance of transforming tomorrow together. We're always looking to engage and partner with other organizations to effectively drive significant impacts with local communities that are really truly valued by these communities we're serving. And we really feel that partnering with other organizations is the way to do this. And lastly, before you jump to the next slide, I just want to applaud Councilmember Fierro earlier. He spoke about the community engagement with developing REACH codes. And a lot of the work we do at the Energy Coalition is partnering with local governments, and we see local governments are really oftentimes on the front lines of a lot of this work. And I'm often impressed by their investment and overall courage to get this important work done. So it takes many to get the work done. You can jump to the next slide. So I wanted to just again to tie into the fantastic opening session for this forum. I wanted to just give you a better sense on how we as an organization are actively working towards the clean, healthy, and thriving communities. I love that term. And I wanted to just quickly touch on a few of our current efforts, which really focus on under-resourced communities. The first one here you see is through the Southern California Regional Energy Network, also known as SoCalRen. Through the public agency programs under SoCalRen, TEC is really able to offer public agency support in identifying and implementing not only energy efficiency projects, but through additional funding is also able to support a broad range of distributed energy resource projects to truly expand opportunities and create clean energy communities within public agencies. Then on the next program is just to touch on, that I want to touch on is the Bassett Avocado Advanced Energy Community Program. Through this effort funded through the CEC, we are leading a team of local nonprofits, community organizations, and energy technology leaders to bring together the Bassett avocado community and produce renewable energy locally. Just again, thinking through our mission as an organization, our metric for success here is both the families actually experiencing the benefits of the clean, local, and renewable and affordable energy, and really thinking about how to develop this blueprint to scale up the solutions we are developing through this 5-year effort, and we're currently in year 1. The next one, just to quickly touch on, is the Healthy Stores Refrigeration Program. This was made possible through a grant through the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and TEC has been working alongside Los Angeles County to engage with small corner stores within food deserts to deliver energy efficiency refrigerators to be stocked with California grown healthy food. This really just not only saves these small corner stores energy, which creates immediate economic benefits, but it also supports local health issues by providing access to healthy food options within the community. And then just jumping over a little bit to the right side of this slide, I want to touch on 2 more. For those that may not be aware, our roots as an organization are actually based on youth education. And this year we developed a curriculum for Rising Sun's Youth Jobs Program. The develops that we designed are really set to engage these Rising Sun youth. And each one is a story that is based on a youth character living in areas affected by pollution and climate change. And it will be used to train hundreds of the youths that I mentioned that are participating in the Rising Sun Jobs Program. And then lastly, but definitely not least, an amazing opportunity this year was the California Climate Action Corps. And this is led by the California Volunteers and Bay Area Community Resources. This is an action-focused summer leadership that engages local community members, and it cultivates change and leads to lasting climate action and climate education impacts across California. And we're one of 5 partners for this effort. And through this very exciting effort, we were able to place 236 fellows statewide, and which will lead to, as you can see here, 1,000 local actions taken, and even many more impacts to the communities they're serving. So jumping to the last slide, I just want a quick plug for a couple of our upcoming sessions at the SEEK Forum this year. So the first one is The Future is Local, Just and Equitable Clean Energy Transformation. I'll be moderating a panel with fantastic panelists from Redwood Coast Energy Authority. We also have MCE, we have SoCalRen from LA County, and then also CalChoice representing Lancaster Clean Energy, just speaking about their efforts to deliver fantastic programs locally within their communities. And then also please join our other webinar that's coming up on Wednesday, August 18th, speaking to the next generation building decarbonization policy evolution in California and Washington. We're going to be speaking, again, another panel, fantastic panel with leaders, local government leaders in both California and Washington, speaking about different efforts related to benchmarking and how to develop ordinances and get them implemented appropriately. So I encourage you to register, and I did not include my contact information here, but I hope many of you can figure out how to reach out to me if you have any questions, and hope to meet all of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel, and thanks again to our sponsors. We're getting close to the end here, everybody, and before we take our little half-hour break, but I do want to circle back to this exercise of ours on Mural. So I'm actually going to go and share my screen and take a look at what you guys have all said over the course of this session. And so just to sort of kind of summarize and wrap up some of what we've heard about progress, opportunities, and challenges, you know, I feel like we're having a really good holistic conversation, and that's starting off the 3 weeks really well. Some things that have popped out to me is, you know, the folks on the line here doing the work, they aren't just doing one thing. They are figuring out how to do community engagement more inclusively. They have to figure out the technology too. So the soft and hard side of things, from microgrids to vehicle grid interactions to data mapping. They also have to do policy and regulatory work. And we want to, you know, really just highlight that there is so much movement happening at the state and the CPUC in terms of those structural changes, really tangibly incorporating things like equity and health. And then organizationally, you know, we're in a really interesting phase where we see these local organizations providing huge amounts of leadership. They've formed, they're in a mature phase, from RENs to CCAs across the state. Local leadership may be more powerful than ever. And so other folks have talked about, you know, that it's become easier to talk about the effects of climate change, and people cannot ignore it anymore. Others have said, I talked about a lot about REACH codes, electrification ordinances. So thank you for that. I'm going to move to challenges. What did folks say here? Somebody said restructuring our policies and programs to share the benefits of energy efficiency and clean energy transportation with renters. Okay, an ongoing challenge. Another challenge, power and decision making is still not shared with communities of color. Hire us and to design the solutions. And that's a powerful statement. And then somebody added local voices during program design. So the idea of co-designing alongside the frontline and previously marginalized communities. Thank you all for your participation on all of this. And last but not least, opportunities. What do folks see out there with opportunities? Down there at the bottom, we see clean, healthy, thriving. That's right. That's what Alana had inspired us with. Public schools as the resilient hubs, seated first in the most impacted communities. Interesting. And then partnering with low-income communities with surrounding commercial industrial zones. Decarbonizing both can provide local jobs and energy security. So some good ideas for some focus areas for the future. Really appreciate you guys putting some thoughts down. And I don't know about you, but I'm really wishing we were together in person, because now I want to talk. I needed to debrief and talk more with you all. But let me go ahead and close this out for today, just by saying we are really looking forward to seeing you at the remaining events during the forum, both this week and for the next 2 weeks, starting in a half an hour with our lunch event. And so that lunch event is going to again be on how local governments can seize the moment, 2021 state budget and policy updates. So we do hope you'll join us for that at noon after you take a little break. And just to say thanks again for joining us. Thanks to the team here at SEEK, who's been working so hard on putting all of this together for all of us. And we are looking forward to the remainder of the week, Wednesday and Thursday events. So we've got a total of 5 more sessions just this week alone. And to view the entire program, you can just go to our website. Make sure you sign up for as many as you're interested in. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in a half an hour.